So hello everyone. We're going to be starting in a couple of minutes. Welcome everyone from the chat. Let's kick it off. So hi everyone, my name's James. I'm from Molten Make. I've got a load of people in the chat. Thankfully, some of you are here for me and not for Jimmy DiResta's multi-crafty thingy. But what are we going to talk about today? Hopefully some of you have read the title, and we're going to talk about how to get beer on tap at home. If you remember me from the last Virtually Crafty, I talked about brewing beer. So this time we're talking about how to get this stuff out of that thing. So there's lots of different ways you can get beer. Now you can go and buy bottles, you can go and buy cans, pretty obviously. And the next step, I suppose, is then moving on to, don't laugh, growlers. This is a growler. This is a glass one. They are named after the noise that they made. So they used to have a loose-fitting lid, just in case. This one's not so loose-fitting, but essentially just a big resealable bottle. This one was from Brewdog that you can seal, and before they had these swing top caps, they would bubble and growl like gas coming out. So this is kind of your basic first step into getting beer at home. Now, one step forwards, I suppose. Insulated. Again, I've stuck with Brewdog. This is my one that they made for me. It's a vacuum insulated one. And if you, I mean, it's not particularly exciting to look inside, but this one will keep your beer fresher for longer, because the kind of enemies of beer are oxygen and temperature. So drink beer fresh, drink beer cold. As I'm sure a lot of the Americans in the audience are going to be laughing at British beer drunk warm, cellar temperature, 12 degrees. That's something degrees foreign. I have no idea. So keep your beer oxygen free, keep your beer cold. It will last a lot longer. So yeah, cheers, Franco. And with lumps. If you want lumps, yeah, some beers actually do have kind of lumps in the bottom. Very heavily hopped beers do. Some of the wild fermented beers, Belgian beers sometimes actually do have lumps in the bottom, often from yeast. Wheat beer, classically, you can kind of tip upside down to get all of that cloudiness back into suspension. So where do you go from there? I mean, this you go and fill up at your local bar, your local brewery. It's quite good. But next step, and there are a few different types of these. This one is a Growlerworks one, and it's got a little gauge on the front. It holds 1.9 liters, or amazingly, for something in the US, it doesn't tell me how many. I'm going to say it's either 128 or 64 fluid ounces. And it's got a little tap on top. This hasn't got anything in, but you can pressurize them as well. So the idea with cellar temperature beer or warm beer, 53, thanks Chris, is that it's the temperature at which the cellar of your pub kept the beer. This is before the days of refrigeration. You might remember my last live stream, we talked about the history of beer and how lager, meaning to store lager beer, was kept cold, whereas ales before were kept at cellar temperature, 10 degrees or so. So why drink it at that temperature? That's just the temperature that it was traditionally drunk at. It's got a slightly better flavor, because the colder something is, the less you can taste it. Anyway, so these Growlerworks little keg, they're mini kegs essentially. Got space that you put a CO2 cartridge inside here, screws into the top. You might just be able to see the indentation. It's a little bit like that you get for cream whippers or for bike emergency inflators. You can screw. So I don't know if we're back online. Yay! Okay, there we go. So you guys let me know in the comments if you can see this. Yay! There we go. So that was fun. It turns out that my laptop crashed. So what I've had to do is plug in directly to the network. So there is now a cable snaking all the way up through there, through my video switcher. So hey, this is the way you're meant to do it. Here we go. So where do we get to? So growlers. So I saw in the chat, Jeff, you're talking about the crowlers. So I don't have one. No, I don't have one. So the Crowler is a can growler. So it is a can that is filled with beer at your bar and then capped there and then, rather than being filled at a brewery. So they are very similar, and actually they last quite a long time. So I would suggest, if you can get a Crowler, they're a great way of transporting beer. But we were talking about this. This is a Growler Works growler. It is a vacuum insulated flask. And this is, yeah, about just shy of 2 litres, something like 128 fluid ounces. That ballpark, maybe 64, I think 128. So this will give you 3-ish pints, and it'll be pressurized with CO2, or even nitrogen. Actually, you can get nitrogen cartridges for these. So if you want to do nitro beer, Guinness stouts are pretty good at things like that. That will keep it fresh, keep it away from oxygen, which can really hamper flavours, particularly for hoppy beers. But then what's your next step afterwards? So we are going to talk about getting beer on tap at home. The first step really is getting the beer. Now, once you know what beer you're going to get, then you'll have an idea really of what you're going to need. So I'm going to show you once I've logged into it. This is, there we go. So here we are. This is Ebria. So just giving you an idea of what beers you can get available. So this is a company that is based in London. Within the UK it ships, and I've logged in here just so you can see some prices. Often I find there's a big barrier that people don't want to tell you how much things cost. So I've got an account and I'm just going to show you. So you can see along here, key keg, cask. Now, the difference between those is really the difficulty. If you've got a connector, so yeah, 64, thanks Jeff, 64 fluid ounces in one of these Growler Works, so 1.9 litres. The first step you need to do is figure out how you can actually get beer. What kind of kegs are going to be in? So I was showing you, here we go. So it's showing you Ebria, and these are in key kegs, but you can actually browse by select type key kegs, eco kegs, Dolium, I don't really know what they are, Kegstar kegs, Unikegs, Petainers, Poly kegs. But to show you kind of the most common variety now is a key keg, and I don't know if I have a, you know what, let's just Google it. So key kegs. So these are a really cool technology. They are essentially a keg that has a plastic bag inside it. So you can see that inside, I don't know if you, yeah, you can see my mouse, there we go. So you can see that there's a PET bag, or PET keg with a bag inside in which the beer goes. So those are great. That bag seals out the oxygen from the atmosphere, and then you can pressurize the space between that outer hard, firm plastic keg wall and the bag inside. That's the bag. And that means you can use any compressed gas. So you don't have to use CO2. Whereas a traditional keg, it's a big metal flask, a little bit like a big version of this, that you put CO2 in the top and beer then comes out through that pressure. A little bit more to it than just CO2 sometimes, but we won't go into the specifics today. So what I would suggest is figure out how you're going to get beer, and you can either go to a place like Ebria. I've got no affiliation with them. They just happen to be one of the few people that would even give me an account. I'm not in the trade. I happen to like beer. That's the limit of my involvement with the beer industry. So find out from either them or from a local brewery. They're a great place to go to. What type of keg do they have? Then you can figure out a keg coupler. So you've got to be able to connect your gas to that keg, whether that's CO2 for the majority of traditional kegs, or whether that's something like compressed air for key kegs, or really any gas, to be honest. Now that coupler is going to be specific to that type of keg, which is a bit of an annoyance if I'm honest. I'm just going to flip you back over to this and just show you this is the variety of different kegs couplers that you can get. I do have a key keg one, but I don't have it here. I've got it somewhere over there, so maybe later on I'll run and grab it for you and show you just what the keg containers look like. But once you've got that, you then have to connect that to your keg, and then what? Well, beer tubing. Now, beer tubing looks like this really. It's quite complicated in a way, not because of what it's made from. This is essentially just quite hard plastic. It is food safe, which is very important, but more so, you need to think about how you're going to connect it to the keg. That's fine. So, often, to interface between this and a keg coupler, and this is a little keg coupler. This is one for a Cornelius keg, which I'm going to show you a bit later on. This is the homebrew style of keg. Now, this has got a threaded post on. I'm not going to zoom in just because otherwise it'll throw the focus off. And traditionally, you would screw a fitting onto the end of here, clamp it on, but a much better technology is a John Guest fitting. So these are push to connect. You see like that, they're connected. And then it's got a little locking collar. Right, go on, let's show you that zoomed in properly. So it's got a little locking collar here, and that is what keeps it in inside. There's some plastic, a plastic ring, and then some jaws inside that keep it locked. As a little aside, if you're going to get anything like this, and here's another style of them. This one's quite grubby, but it's a screw fitting, so perfect for kegs. Push them together. Clicks, there's no ring seal around it, and they won't pull apart. But if you want to get them out, you push that collar in, and then it works. You can get, and these are brilliant, particularly if you've got a big setup, these locking posts. It'll stop you from accidentally disconnecting it. There is, trust me, nothing worse than, other way. There we go. Nothing worse than having your keg setup leak. And with these red clips, they're perfect. So, take those apart. This is what you interface your plastic tubing with a keg. So you need to get the right John Guest coupler to adapt your gas tubing or your beer tubing. You can use the same one for beer as you do for gas. You can get slightly cheaper ones for gas because they don't need to be quite the same degree of food safe. But then the difficulty I find, and it's very difficult to explain in a way, is that you've got to create some amount of resistance in your tubing. So imagine this is your keg, and then over here you've got your tap, faucet. Now, the distance between your keg and your faucet is going to determine the amount of flow that you get. So you want enough, a short enough distance that there's not so much resistance that the gas has to push it through that it'll actually come out quickly. If you remember a few Virtually Crafty sessions ago, Al from Al's Hack Shack, who's up next, there he is, somewhere in there anyway, he set up a kegerator. That was something we talked about a lot, and it's quite hard to get your head around having enough tubing but not too much. So imagine the scenario, you've got too much tubing. The pressure that you're putting on that beer with CO2 can't push it all the way through, and you end up pouring really slow pints of beer, which no one likes. But then what's the opposite? Why not have a really short piece of tubing? Why not just go straight from your keg coupler onto a faucet? Well, that's often the problem. You need enough resistance to step down the pressure that's sitting on top of your beer to the pressure at the tap. If any of you opened a can of beer after you've shaken it, or a can of anything carbonated, if you suddenly release that pressure, all of the CO2 comes out of solution, and that will give you a foamy beer, which is even worse than a slow pouring beer. I'd much rather have a beer or a cider or a sparkling anything that takes a little bit longer to pour but is a better quality product when you pour it. You're not going to be throwing so much away. So you need to create enough resistance in that line so that the pressure, let's call it 20 psi that's on the keg, gets down to about 1, maybe 2 psi. Okay, how do you do that? There are beer line calculators, and essentially you are figuring out the amount of tubing that you have, and I will just switch over to a beer line calculator so you can see once it's finished loading. Here we go. So this is a beer line calculator for perfect pours. I don't know what the formula for this is. I would just look it up online. It's a lot easier. So the regulator pressure, that's the pressure that you set on top of your beer. The rise is the height from your keg up to your faucet or your tap. Technically the tap is the thing that goes on the keg, and the faucet is the thing that beer comes out of, at least within the US brewing literature, which a lot of this is coming from. So this is probably in feet. And then your inside diameter of the beer line. Flip back over to one of these cameras and I will show you just a couple of examples. So this is obviously thicker and has a larger inside diameter, so it doesn't create so much resistance, which if you're going to have a really long, huge setup with a commercial bar, you're probably going to want that. You want to be able to get beer a long distance without it causing a lot of pressure. Whereas at home you have the opposite. Now, there's lots of different things that can cause beer foaming, but that line resistance that we're calculating here really is the key one. So you're often going to have to go for a much smaller tube for a homebrew setup than you would do for a commercial. This is actually a 3/8 tubing, 3/16, or maybe a 1/4 inch is probably closer to what you're going to be using at home. Alternatively, you just have a really, really long length, but any of you who are familiar with the Hagen-Poiseuille law will know that resistance is a factor of 4 in terms of resistance. So your radius is a factor of 4, so it's 4 times more powerful at least. So factor of 4, so to the power 4 versus line length is just a linear thing. Again, I professionally have to learn that for my job. None of you are interested, but there we go. I'm going to educate you on something vaguely medical, or at least physicsy. So back to the beer line calculator. As we know, this tubing is going to make the biggest difference, and you can see just by going up in the inside diameter by 1/8 of an inch, it's a huge jump in length. So figure out the amount of beer line that you need for your tap setup. And hopefully I'm going to jump you over to one of my tap setups over here now, and I will show you my setup. So I'm going to stick you back on the still screen for a second. Crude but efficient. I remember having problems when building temporary pubs. Yeah, exactly. Now that's is exactly the problem that you have a lot of the time. Let me find my setup over here. We'll see if we can get you back in with some video. This one has been charging while I've had this set up. Here we go. Right, there we go. We are now live on action camera. This is my setup here at home. So we've got the faucets up here, and then running down below. Yes, this is a little secret project about making a laser cut beer tray. Here is my setup. These are Corny kegs. So a Cornelius keg. They are what soft drinks used to come in before post-gun mixing technology. In other words, the syrup is added at the same time it's carbonated. They used to get Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever in these. So these are my kegs. That's my pizza steel. And you can see that they've got a connector coming in one side and a connector going out the other. Now that is a gas in connector. The liquid out comes through here to a chiller unit. Now there's a few ways that you can do chilling of beer, and we'll talk about that shortly. But this is an inline chiller. There is a fan and essentially a fridge, so the fan pumps through a refrigerated coil that cools down a water bath in here and chills the beer. And you can see there's a lot of line set up here. This insulated tubing loops up and round inside for going out through the back and up to the faucet setup. So this is my gas setup. I'm running these at, let's see if we can get you some light. There you go. These are, let's see, 20 psi, about 1.5 bars of pressure. And that's for up to 3 kegs, as you can see at the moment. Focus. I've got 3 taps, but only 2 kegs, and one of them is actually water. So let's pour some from here. This tap handle was made for me very kindly by Tanda Madison. There we go. Sparkling water on tap at home. Not fizzing out everywhere, not sputtering. Pretty good, I would say. So let's bring you back over to live camera number 1. And if you guys have got any questions, stick them down in the chat. Here we go. Cheers, everyone. So, beer line length calculation. Look it up online. Figure out the amount of tubing you need so that you don't end up with a foamy mess, but equally you don't end up with a beer that pours incredibly slowly. If you have an option, aim towards pouring too slowly. You can always then cut out some of that line. So, quick recap, where are we? We know that we want beer, or cider, or sparkling wine, or seltzer, or whatever it is you want. Water, so these corny kegs I just fill with filtered tap water. It's really nice to have sparkling water carbonated to the amount you like. You can add the minerals that you want. So if you want Vass, then you can recreate that. You can find the mineral profile online, add salts to deionized water, and have exactly what you want sparkling wise on tap to your own carbonation level. Helps keep your liver a bit healthier, but it's a nice option if you don't want to have beer and you have a tap set up. So like I said, when I don't have my own beer, or occasionally I'll buy commercial beer and put it on, I'll always have a keg of water there as well. Absolutely, you can put flavors in. One thing I suggest doing is, rather than doing a syrup, is to do bitters. So like Angus Jura bitters, I'll show you the inside of my fridge. God, this is absolutely cutting edge technology. I mean, this is really what you're paying for. Come on, go live. Come on, there we go. Oh, it's just like cribs. So I have a whole shelf of bitters in little pump bottles. So this one is hop flavored bitters. So if you really want a beer-like drink, this is a great option. So you take your hop bitters. This is just a high percentage alcohol, sort of about 70%. You just put a couple little pumps of it in. You can see it's got that slightly green colour. And I made this just by dissolving, steeping hops in alcohol. Not that you're ever using these right. Ha ha, Caro. Occasionally I do drink something other than beer. Occasionally. Okay, so where have we got to? We've got the kegs that we want, either Cornelius kegs like I showed you in my setup, or commercial kegs like a key keg. A source of gas. If you're using a non-key keg setup, you have to use CO2. And if you're using a key keg that's got a keg and a bag inside, bag inside, you can put any gas on the outside. Yes, just before taking a sip of beer. So you can use any gas you want, but I find that CO2 is quite easy to get, and actually it works really well, to be honest. So even with key kegs, sometimes that's what I'll use. The exception to that rule is when I go to events like Maker Central, and I have a setup with a Linde chiller. Let me show you what those look like. So, I'm gonna have to disconnect my fancy setup here. You know what? The last time I tried to do this, it crashed the stream. So I'm going to be really sad and just show you with the camera looking at my screen rather than doing this properly. Here we go. So, almost there. Focus. There we go. Okay, so these are chillers and have a compressed gas unit inside them as well. So they've got your faucets. They can pump gas out into a key keg or something similar. So any of you who came to the secret bar at Maker Central will know that I had something really similar to set up. And if you're going to be doing a simple one-off occasional use setup, a Linde chiller is great. The other options are the inline chillers that I've got, which are stuck kind of in one place. They don't really move. They've got a big water bath inside. These Linde chillers have got a cooling block. Sometimes you can create something else. So the very first year of Maker Central, I made my own, again with a hand pump, like a beer pump that you use in American films. Sorry, that's my fridge that I forgot to close. So you can use a hand pump to push the gas in. You can use a coil inside an ice bath to chill things down. And then you've got essentially a power-free mobile setup. If you don't have, if you don't have one of those chillers, that's the route I suggest to go. Get a beer, they're called a party tap, that go on top of your keg. With a key keg, you can use that atmospheric air, that hand compressed air, to push the beer out without worry of oxygen getting to it and ruining the flavour. And just run it through a stainless steel coil, or even just some beer line, like a long length of it, inside an ice water bucket. One of those like traveling Yeti coolers or cooler on wheels is a really good setup for that. You can even have your beer faucet on the outside, just to give you something to pour from rather than having to make a mount for it as well. Let me just check how we're doing for time. 12:30. Jeff, have you ever used helium to get a high-pitched voice? I've not. I've thought about it. I've got helium at home for welding. If you do any sort of TIG welding of aluminium, you might have helium. Argon you could use. I've never tried it. Some of the gases do have different flavors. So like nitrous oxide that you put in whipped cream, or kind of squirty cream, has got a slightly sweet flavor. Carbon dioxide is acidic. The CO2 dissolves into the liquid. That's why carbonated water is acidic. Forms carbonic acid. I don't know. Helium's a noble gas. I think it could be an interesting thing to try. It's a good question. Sean from Tinkering Rocks asked, refrigerating the keg versus chilling the line trade-offs. Yes, that is a big kind of point. We talked about oxygen and temperature being the kind of the enemies of keeping beer or anything fresh, to be honest. So a kegerator, a keg refrigerator, or a keezer, a keg freezer. So you take a fridge or a refrigerator or a freezer, put your kegs inside, chill that rather than chilling the line as it comes out, is a really good option because it keeps your beer at a temperature that will let it keep for longer. My setup, the big downside to it is it doesn't keep it fresh. Big upside, you have to drink it quicker, perhaps. So I would say that really the best setup probably is chilling the kegs. And commercially, that's what bars will do. They will keep the kegs chilled. They might need to have a second chiller in line just to give it that last cool down before it gets to the faucet, the beer tap that the beer comes out of. But I would suggest that's probably the best route to go. The thing you then have to consider is the solubility of CO2 at different temperatures. So CO2 is actually more soluble in a liquid that's at a lower temperature. So you don't have to put the same amount of pressure on top of the beer to push it out, because the pressure you put on top determines the level of carbonation in the beer. So really that's where you start, and that's what I kind of skipped over for the beer line balancing setup. You figure out how carbonated you want your beer based on the style of beer. Often you do this with volumes of CO2. So about 2.2 generic volume of CO2. You need 2.2 of those per volume of beer. And again, there are calculators to figure that out. Your highly carbonated German Weissbiers, 2.4. Saisons, something really carbonated, maybe 3. British beers, 1.8, 1.5, a bit lower, but roughly that sort of ballpark anyway. Figure out the carbonation level you want, the temperature you're keeping your beer at, and that will tell you your pressure on top of the beer. That then lets you determine your line length. So if you're keeping your beers chilled, unlike what I've got, so if you're keeping them in a kegerator or a keezer or a cold room, if you're a professional bar, you can have a lower gas pressure on top. You don't need quite so much line. So kind of in summary, Sean, refrigerating keeps the beer longer. It lets it keep longer. It means you use less pressure on top. You have shorter lines. It's probably a better setup, but you have to constantly run it. So this is a kitchen. I don't have the chiller on constantly. I don't honestly drink enough beer that it would be worthwhile. I just use smaller kegs, drink them as and when I want to, keep them chilled in the brewery somewhere else, away from the house. So really good question. Thanks, that was a great one. Caro, yes, I do make good coffee as well. And if you stick around to the end of the stream, I'm going to show you guys a little... Someone's at the front door. Who could that be? It's a surprise. It's unrelated and we're going to move on. Someone's at the door. I've got it. Thank you. Yes, if you stick around, I was going to say, if you stick around to the end of the stream, we've got about 20 minutes left. We're going to talk about my next video. I'm going to show you a sneak peek. Some of you might have seen something on Instagram already, but I'm going to show you the full cut in a glorious non-vertical video. What have we missed? Real simple thing, beer on James. Yes, often at Maker Central, beers are on me. Last Maker Central I brought 80 litres of beer. I think we drank all but 10 of it, and 20 litres of coffee. That all went very quickly. Okay, so recap. Let's include Sean's things. So, great idea. Do you chill the keg or do you not? Kind of depends on what you're able to do. That determines the amount of pressure that you're going to put on top of your beer. If you're using a key keg, then they set that at the brewery and you just need to match it with compressed gas of any kind. If you're using a traditional keg or a Cornelius keg, those stainless steel ones that I've got here, that you can refill, I didn't mention that, they have got a big hole in the top that's got a resealable hatch. So that's what I, as a home brewer, use almost all the time. And that's how I can fill up water on tap. You put a pressure on top to keep the beer adequately carbonated. That then tells you how long a line you're going to need. Use a beer tap calculator. If you're not going to keep them cold, then you have to either have a, I think it's called a jockey plate, which is a slab of metal that your beer runs through with a circuitous path inside that you put inside ice, or a coil of your beer line, or you can use an inline chiller like the Linde units, the little things with a faucet on, or you can just run it inside a pool of ice water, which is what I did at the very first Maker Central. Works really well and is cheap and portable. That deals with your chilling, and then you need to have your faucet. Give me 2 minutes and I will show you what I'm talking about. We're going to go back to the still just so you guys can figure out what's going on next. It'll be Al from Al's Hack Shack. I'm going to be back in 1 minute. Stick any questions you have in the chat, and I will see you in 1 minute. Okay, I've got you a present. It's inside this box. These, by the way, flight galley cases are amazing. If you need something to, keep your stuff in, I love these. Should do a stream about these one day. Sorry, that was loud. Okay. So I have got a key keg coupler, some beer faucets, another keg coupler, and a beer tap. Let's put these over here. Apologies for all the noise, I imagine that's very annoying. I'll try and be quiet. Do less carbonated beers make you burp less? Yes, they do. So it's the amount of CO2. Some of that comes out of solution, and yeah, they're less carbonated, they'll make you burp less. Right, let's set some focus on me, because I've shifted my chair. There we go, that looks close enough. And we're going to flip over to backup camera. I'm going to show you, once we get it running, I'm going to show you the key keg versus other keg connectors. So here we go. That's it. I'm going to move my phone because I know some of you have my number and it'll be not hilarious for you to suddenly send me a message. So this is a key keg coupler, and this is I think this is a Sankey keg coupler. So you can see on the bottom they have a spear that goes inside your keg, and they sit on top in different ways. This is where the beer comes out and where the gas goes in. Slightly different setup on a key keg, but they essentially sit on top, and these are those John Guest connectors I was talking about. You need to figure out what beer line you're going to be connecting there for what beer line you're going to be connecting for the amount of resistance you need, your line length calculator to determine what these are. So you can kind of see it's this really complicated mix of, you need to know what this is to figure out what that is, and the first thing really is that keg. So figure out what keg you're going to be using. That lets you decide whether you get a key keg connector or the more traditional Sankey keg connector, or D keg or S keg. And then if you're going to be using a Cornelius keg, then you're actually going to be using those little connectors that I showed you earlier. Something like this that sits on top of a post. These actually come in two different varieties, ball lock and pin lock. Get the ball lock ones, they're much more common. You didn't need to see that again anyway. They're much more common, and I would say they are a better option most of the time. So you've then got that set up, then going to run it to a faucet of some kind. Here are quite hard to do. What you should do is wood turner handle. Yeah, keeping it very virtually crafty there, wood turning. They're a great project actually. I do a little bit of wood turning. It's not really my area of expertise, but it's fun, I get it. And if you want to turn me a handle, feel free to send me one. I can send you some mead or some beer maybe. Why not? It's a fun make a trade. A few people have done that. So this is the setup that you get. Quite clearly, it's a beer tap handle. But there are different types of beer tap. Who'd have thought it? And it's not just size. Don't laugh. These have different places that they seal. So either they seal down here inside the tap body, which lets quite a lot of beer hang out in here and go stale, or they seal back here, and you can see kind of in the end there. If I switch over to rubbish focusing cam, you might just be able to see in there, you can see the little valve inside. That is called a back sealing tap, and that's really what you want to get. Perlick make great taps. There's a few different places. Look online, see which one is in your price range. They're all as good as each other. Wood Wizard by Colin. Colin asks or says, always wanted to try mead. Well, if you are as much of a wood wizard as your name implies, send me a message on Instagram. I will send you a bottle of mead if you turn me a tap handle. There you go. That sounds like a fair trade. So I would suggest getting the forward sealing taps. Perlick are a good brand. In terms of connecting the taps, this is a connector. You might have seen this kind of setup at a bar. The screw onto the end. There we go, and that's what you would see coming out. So if you've got your fridge, your kegerator, your keezer, then this is what you'd have coming out. Taps are interchangeable on the front. This is determined by the length of wall that you're going through. So for a keg, fridge, kegerator or a keezer, that's going to be reasonably thick. If you're just putting it on a board, so Al, he did his onto a T-Rex toy. You don't need quite so long a shank for that. And on the back, again, John Guest connector. Rasmus, careful what you wish for, James. I'm very capable of making very amounts of tap handles. Yes, Rasmus made me a giant metal tap handle with Steve from Moonshine Metalworks. So I should be careful. Redsmith, yes, we can. We can trade things for things. That's the joy of being a maker. Of course, Red and I have sent a few things each other's way over the years. Good to have you in the chat there, Ed. So we've got about 15 minutes left. Chuck any questions you have here about beer setups. If you want to do a make or trade with me, I've done them in the past. I'm on Instagram, I'm Malt and Make. If you like a t-shirt, you can have one of those too, if you send me some money. In the last few minutes, I'm going to be showing you the kind of little teaser video, and I'm going to be doing a competition of sorts, kind of like a fun maker video competition. So really we're just going to wrap up this kind of beer brewing section, get yourself mentally and physically prepared for Al. Al from Alexander's Construction Shed is on next. You know him, you love him, maybe. Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. I'll look out for that. Sending me a message about a maker trade. So while I set up to hopefully not crash the computer this time and show you the video, I'll talk a bit about my channel in general. So like I said, for those of you who are joining me, is it possible to be prepared for Al? I think prepared is probably a strong word. So my name's James, I have a channel called Malt and Make. Minimum budget, great question. So the cheapest that you can do this setup depends a bit on the price of the keg. So a keg is probably your largest expenditure. You're looking at maybe £60 for 30 litres as a really cheap setup. If you go to a brewery with a Cornelius keg and say, can you fill this? Down near the Forge of Moonshine Metalworks and Wonky Workshop, that kind of area of the country where there's lots of cidery places. There is Barrow Hill Cidery. They will fill up a keg if you bring it to them, and it's very reasonable. So whenever I go down to see either of those two guys or down to Somerset, I will take a Cornelius keg, fill it up with cider and have that. And that is maybe £30 for a keg. The kegs themselves, if you buy Cornelius kegs, are getting quite expensive now. They're probably £90. You can buy them new. You can buy them used. The used ones are great. Almost all the mine are used, so get them used and give them a clean. The beer tubing is very minimal. You're maybe spending £10. I've got loads of extra stuff. So if you only need a short bit, let me know. But if you're looking for lots of it, you can get it on eBay, cut to size. That's what I would suggest doing. Taps, fancy taps like this that are metal are somewhat expensive. Maybe £30, something like that. A bit more if you have this set up on the back. John Guest fittings, 10, 20 quid in total. But the cheapest I reckon you can do this is, excluding the cost of beer, you could probably do it for under £100 if you have a cool box or reuse something, or just use ice to chill your beer. You can get the SodaStream adapters. So a lot of the stuff is reusable. Yeah, you're looking on the order of maybe £100, £200. A lot of it is the initial setup cost. After that, pretty similar. JP, what's the opinion on make your own beer kits? I think they're okay, but I would suggest a better option is to go to somewhere like the Malt Miller. It's based kind of in Wiltshire. Really good company. They will sell you a fresh kit. They will be able to advise you on how to do it. You can check out my last live stream of how to do brew in a bag, which is a great way to get into beer making. The actual making of the beer is quite simple, fermenting it and then serving it, which is why I'm doing this setup, or this stream to talk about. A little bit more complicated. It takes half a day to make beer. It takes a couple of weeks to ferment. So I think the make your own beer kits are really good, but I would go for one from a specific homebrew cellar rather than from Wilko's, just because I know that it's a bit more of a robust product. I'm going to give you something that you can look forward to. Have I done a video on how to make a kegerator? I haven't. I've not got a kegerator. I've got an inline setup. I would love to have a kegerator, but my kitchen is one of my favourite rooms in the house, and I didn't want to besmirch it with a kegerator setup. We've got 10 minutes left. We've got about this much beer to go. I'm going to set up to show you guys my latest video. So what I do on my channel is I do a lot of different things. I do metal work, woodwork. I've done some wood turning. This is something I have wood turned, and one of the things I quite like doing is just making videos. So this thing is a challenge to any makers out there. I'm going to probably post this in the Fools with Tools group as a suggestion of make a video less than 1 minute in length with anything as the topic. Ideally pick something that's just easy and to hand, and I challenge anyone to a 1 minute video off. Of course, I'm starting off, so I need to show the way forward. So if you join me, let's make sure I'm on the right settings there. We're going to jump over to, yeah, here we go. So we'll start it off. This is a sneak preview of my latest video. Which I realised none of you could just see, so let me start that again. It is never a virtually crafty festival unless there is some technical problem. Bear with me, bear with me. Come on, mouse. Okay, let's try that again. Full screen. Oh. Sorry, audio, there we go. So yes, there we go. Thank you. Lost your mic. So that is my submission to my own competition. I really appreciate the comments, guys. Yes, I tried to do something a bit more cinematic. I tried to keep some of the humor I normally have in my videos. I love espresso, but I thought that was a fun way to end it rather than a pretentious hipster way, which is the entire rest of the video. So I put that challenge out to you. Go out, create a video, do something a little bit different, try and flex your video creating skills, whether it's a new style or whether it's your first video. I'd love to see what they are. Tag me on Instagram, I'm at maltandmake. I'm on YouTube as well, as hopefully you know, so subscribe to me and then you'll remember who I am. And I'd love to see them. I really had a lot of fun making that. And it's amazing. That was a day of shooting and editing and color grading and audio, and I've ended up with something that was really fun. If you liked that, I've got a video that's a little bit similar on a fun coffee pipe. So making a thing called a bripe out of solid copper. So that's a bit more of my normal style of videos. Is a bit of woodwork, a bit of metal work. So head over to my channel after this. Add it to your watch later thing because you're going to go and watch Al from Al's Hack Shack next. Sorry, Alexander's Assembly Shed. next, and go and watch my video later this evening. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me. We've got just coming up for 5 minutes before Al starts, so we'll give you an opportunity to go and grab a drink. Let me stick up the order for the day. Where are they? I'm not in the way now. So we've got Al from Alexander's assembly area, something like that, on after this, then Heidi, and we've got basically just an all-star lineup, starting with Jake, following all the way through after this. So takeaway messages: go and set up some beer, go and make a 1-minute video, go and watch Al's Hack Shack. No, damn it, I got it right that time. Keg, movie, Al's Hack Shack. Subscribe to me if you really want to. If you'd really like to, get a t-shirt. These are really quite nice. I made them myself. Oh yeah, I actually made these. Screen printed by me. Thanks for the stream, everyone. I'm going to sign out now, and I will see you over at Al's Hack Shack. Al's Hack Shack! Bye! Bye!